editor put me on something cool. I guess this is the real highway to hell. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are 10 scary unsolved cases on the I45. Make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's drive down a long road. Number 10, Rhonda Johnson and Sharon Shaw.
There was a path that came through here, and some kids were actually riding dirt bikes, and they got a foul odor.
Rhonda Renee Johnson and Sharon Lynn Shaw were two American girls who disappeared in Harris County, Texas on the afternoon of August 4th, 1971. In early 1972, the skeletal remains of both girls were discovered in and around Clear Lake near Galveston Bay. A local man, Michael Lloyd Self, was charged with the executions in 1972 and convicted of Shaw's execution in 1975. Controversy arose in 1998 when convicted Terminator Edward Harold Bell confessed to both executions. Bell's confession and corroborating statements from both law enforcement and prosecutors that Self had been coerced into a false confession led many to believe that Self had been wrongfully convicted. Self passed away in prison in 2000. The case has often been associated with the Texas Deli Fields, a 25-acre section of land off of Interstate 45 in League City, where the bodies of 4 young women have been discovered since the 1980s.
2 years later, they found the skeleton of another young woman. While the police were looking around the area, they come across a third skeleton, one after another after another.
A fictionalized film about the area, titled Texas Deli Fields, was released in 2011.
911, what is your emergency?
Help me. A man in my house. No.
On January 3rd, 1972, 2 guys fishing in Clear Lake discovered a human skull floating in the water, which they had initially believed to be a sports ball. 6 weeks later, searchers discovered the rest of the body, along with that of another girl in a marsh near the lake. According to a coroner's inquest filed on February 17, 1972, the skull found in the lake was determined via dental records to have belonged to Shaw. Additionally, a crucifix found wrapped around the jawbone of the skull was identified by Shaw's mother to have belonged to her daughter. The other body found in the marsh was positively identified as Johnson. Number 9, Michelle Garvey. Michelle Garvey went missing from New London, Connecticut, presumably after running away from home on June 1st, 1982. She was believed to have intended to return to her birth state, New Jersey, or to North Carolina. She had a previous history of running away, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Initially, it was unknown what happened to Garvey, as she may have left home to start a new life and was thought to have possibly been still alive. Garvey's body was found on July 1st, 1982 in Baytown, Texas, 1 month after she went missing. Authorities were unable to identify her body, but could determine that the victim was a white female between 15 and 20 years old with blue eyes and curly red hair. The cause of removal of the victim was determined to be strangulation. The girl was also approximately 5 feet 1 inch to 5 feet 3 inches, or 1.6 meters tall, and had one of her ears pierced. Her body was found wearing brown clothing, including a long-sleeved button-down shirt with a distinct horse embroidery on the breast pocket. Her pants were made of corduroy material. The body was disposed of in a field after she passed away, possibly merely hours after her slaughter. She was buried near 2 other unidentified slaughter victims found in 1981 who were identified in 2021 as Dean and Tina Klaus. Number 8, Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson. Galveston residents Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson both disappeared. People who knew them stated that the two had been best friends since childhood and were almost inseparable. Besides, the pair shared a love for surfing, and being teenage girls, were pretty popular with their friends' circle. They were also brilliant students and had big aspirations for their future, which were destroyed by a crime fueled by hatred. Debbie and Maria were supposed to travel to Houston, Texas on November 15th, 1971. However, since the girls were traveling together, they assured their parents that they would somehow hitchhike to the place. Moreover, they were also excited to be journeying on their own and set out early in the day. Later, Galveston residents mentioned that they spotted Debbie and Maria standing near an island ice cream shop, tagging down passing vehicles. Eventually, a man in a white van stopped by the curbside and picked the girls up after agreeing to drive them to Houston. Shockingly, that was the last time anyone saw Debbie and Maria alive, as they disappeared soon after. When Debbie and Maria's family learned that the teens had not reached Houston on time, they got extremely worried and contacted local authorities. Galveston police got in touch with law enforcement officials in Houston, and the authorities launched a statewide search for the missing girls. There was absolutely no news for 2 days, and the families began fearing the worst. Tragically, their fears were confirmed when Debbie and Maria's deceased bodies were eventually located in Turner's Bayou near Texas City. An autopsy later mentioned that both teens were shot before being tied down and drowned in the bayou. Number 7. Donna Gonsoulin Prudhomme. In 1991, people passing the fields found a fourth body of a woman who was referred to as a Jane Doe until January 2019, when Audrey Lee Cook was also identified. Donna Gonsoulin Prudhomme lived most of her life in Port Arthur, Texas, and was married with 2 sons. She left her husband and took her children when he became abusive, the FBI reported. Donna asked her sister, Diane, to mail her birth certificate to her home in Clear Lake near the end of the 1980s, and after that, she never heard from Donna again. Prudhomme's sisters said she was a beautiful woman and mother and loved fishing and Cajun food, according to the FBI. Number 6. Laura Miller. Laura Miller had recently moved to League City with her family and also went missing. Miller was musically gifted, according to the FBI, and attended Clear Creek High School, per People magazine. She had a rough time in school as she began to have seizures that forced her to miss school, quit her choir, and have trouble in her social life. On September 10th, 1984, she asked if she could call her boyfriend from a payphone, since her family's phone wasn't set up yet, according to the FBI. Her mother agreed and drove her to a payphone, with Laura walking half a mile to get back home. She never made it back to the house, and police deemed her just a runaway at first. But months passed without the family hearing from her, and on February 2nd, 1986, 17 whole months after she first disappeared, her body was discovered by 2 children playing in the woods near a dirt trail just south of League City, right by the very same field as where another person was found, per ABC 13 and the FBI. Number 5. Audrey Lee Cook. While searching for another individual, police found a third unidentified body, naming her a Jane Doe, until she was identified in January 2019. Cook was a 30-year-old mechanic living in Houston, Channel View, and Heights in Texas. Her family described her as free-spirited, according to ABC 13. The last time she was ever seen was in December 1985, which is also when her family stopped hearing from her. On February 2nd, 1986, the same day Miller was found, detectives discovered Audrey Lee's decomposed body, which showed that she had been shot in the back and had several broken ribs, ABC 13 reported. She was identified after 33 years using technology to reconstruct her face and showing it on the news, per ABC 13. Eventually, the FBI got involved and they were eventually able to determine their identity. Number 4. Sondra Ramber. Sondra was last seen in her family's residence in Santa Fe, Texas on October 26, 1983. She disappeared from their house and has not been seen again. The door to the home was open and biscuits were baking in the oven at the time Sondra vanished. Her coat and purse were also located inside the residence. She was initially believed to have gone to the store for a moment, but she never returned to the house. Some reports may state that Sondra disappeared while en route to school during the morning hours. Sondra's father reported her as a missing person during the following morning. Authorities initially classified her as a runaway, though the circumstances surrounding her disappearance are unclear. Several investigators believed Sondra may have started a new life for herself with an assumed identity, but there is little evidence available in her case. Sondra's case may be related to a string of disappearances and/or slaughters of young women from the Galveston County, Texas area since the 1970s. Michelle Thomas vanished in 1985 and Suzanne Renee Richardson disappeared in 1988. Law enforcement has not determined if these 4 cases are connected. Number 3. Janet Doe. While leads have dwindled over the years, science and technology have advanced. In January 2019, Renison received a call that breathed new life into this cold case, the identification of Jane Doe and Janet Doe. Jane Doe, found in 1986, was Audrey Lee Cook. Cook had worked as a mechanic and lived in the Houston Channel View and area Heights of Texas. She was last seen in December 1985. Janet Doe, who was found in 1991, was identified as Donna Gonsoulin Prudhomme, mentioned earlier. Knowing the names of the women has given Renison and the local police something to work for. They're contacting neighbors and friends and reviewing police records from that time. A key part of the investigation is appealing to the public for help. Renison and local police need to talk to anyone who can provide additional information. Details as simple as where the women worked or the names of their friends who haven't been interviewed yet could be key to solving the slaughters. Number 2. Audrey Cook. An unidentified person described as a free-spirited individual who was a motorcyclist moved into the Houston area with her girlfriend in 1976 from Memphis, Tennessee at age 21, following a number of years residing in California. She had worked as a mechanic for a golf cart company in 1979, Harrison Equipment Company in 1980, Balloon Affair in 1981, and then as a mechanic for National Rent-A-Car during unknown times. She was last heard from in late December 1985 and is believed to have sold and used substances. She was also said to have become associated with the wrong crowd. Despite this, her family received numerous letters indicating her life was enjoyable at the time, though lacking specificity with details that could be valuable during the investigation into her passing. Her family had spent years trying to locate her. Their remains were found in a field in the 3000 block of Calder Road, on the same day that the body of Laura Miller was located nearby. The victims' bodies were not buried, rather hidden from view. Both were left in a supine position near a tree. At the time, Miller's case had already received significant public attention, having been reported missing nearly a year and a half before. The crime scene contained a significant amount of debris. Investigators were thorough in documenting potential evidence at the scene, including discarded keys, shoes, business cards, and hair. The victim had been shot in the back, and she had suffered additional injuries to several ribs. Similarly, Heidi Fye, 25, discovered in the same vicinity, had also suffered significant trauma to the ribs. Number 1. Shelley Sike. On May 24, 1986, a day of drinking at the beach ended when John Robert King, driving Gerald Zwartz's car, ran Sykes off the road as she drove home from working at Guido's restaurant along with Galveston Seawall. Sykes' car was found the next morning along Interstate 45 near Dickinson, and the 19-year-old college student was never seen alive again. Sykes is presumed terminated, but her body was never found. In 1987, King called El Paso police from a motel there and confessed to the crime, but without a body, police could not charge him or Zwartz with slaughter. The men were convicted of aggravated kidnapping in separate trials in 1988, and both were sentenced to life in prison. Although they were not ruling on slaughter charges, former Galveston County Sheriff Gene Leonard said when interviewed in 2007 that jurors in both trials were convinced that King and Zwartz ended Sykes. Zwartz had his first parole hearing in June 2007, 20 years after his conviction. The parole board denied his request and ordered that he become eligible again after 5 years, the maximum period under Texas law. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this one. I am Sweaty and I'm leaving. See you next time on Crime Time.